My guest title today is On Target at On Promos, powered by Proforma. We'll find out what that is because I'm really not sure. Her expertise is taking care of businesses' graphic communication needs. So welcome, Kimble Bosworth.
Well, hi. It's so good to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
That is great that you're here. Let's start with a question. How did you die when you were 15?
Well, that is a good place to start. It's kind of where I restarted. I was at a friend's slumber party and started feeling very cold and didn't know what that was about. They thought maybe I had the flu. Her dad was a doctor. They isolated me, put me in another room. 2 days later, my fever would not go away. I was convulsively shaking and I had gone blind. And my doctor came back into town from a trip out of town to see me. And as my mom was carrying me up the steps to his office, he said, "Turn around, take her to Texas Children's Hospital. She's got toxic shock. We need to get her to the emergency room as fast as possible." So sure enough, they take me to the emergency room. They strip me down, put me in a cold alcohol bath to try to remove the temperature. And I had to go to the bathroom. So they had left me behind a curtain in the emergency room. I grabbed the IV pole, walked my naked ass across the emergency room to the bathroom, and then collapsed on the floor. And the doctor found me there after they were looking around trying to figure out how I'd even gotten off of the gurney. And the last words I heard before I completely passed out were, "She's got a blood pressure over 50 over 13, and she just walked across the emergency room. She's going to be just fine. You have a very strong daughter." Well, I spent the next 5 days in an intensive care room, hovering over my body, watching them try to fix me, hoping and praying that they would fix me because I was very uncomfortable and they couldn't hear me telling them that. And eventually, somewhere in the middle of those days, I had prayed for sleep, and someone came to me and said, "I can help you fall asleep." And I said, "Great." And I said, "What do I need to do?" He said, "Make yourself comfortable. Where would you like to be?" I said, "How about a hammock in my backyard?" He said, "Great." Put me in a hammock in my backyard and started swinging me until I fell asleep. And he said, "The most important thing is when I tell you to wake up, you need to wake up." And I said, "Okay." And he gave me some sleep and would tell me to wake up, and I'd wake up and you'd see the doctors were a little agitated around me. And that went on for about 5 days. And one time I ended up so far away and didn't wake up, didn't hear him tell me to wake up. And I ended up all the way down the tunnel that I'd been kind of hanging out at the beginning of, in this amazing, light-filled, fabulous place with all these other people around me, kids, dogs, moms, pops, whatever. And everyone was being met by people except me. I asked the person I was with why. No one was there to meet me. And he said, "Well, no one has died yet." And I said, "What do you mean died? I didn't sign up for died. I signed up for sleep." And he said, "Well, you didn't wake up when I told you to, so you're dying." And I looked back down that tunnel and I saw the people in the other room. The doctor had left through the glass enclosure and was on the other side of the glass talking to my mother. And I could hear as clear as day what he was saying. He was explaining to her how he was going to try to revive me. And I said, "Well, I want to go back." And he said, "Then go back." And I said, "Well, I don't know how to get there. And it really is hard to move from here because this feels so amazing." And he said, "You'll figure it out." And he left. And at about that moment, I heard my mom say, "I don't care what you have to do. You bring my daughter back. I cannot outlive my daughter." And at that moment, I realized that the thing that was holding me in heaven was that feeling that my mother felt for me back at the other end of that tunnel. I said, okay, so what's holding me here is love. That's what I need to go back to. So I fixed my eyes on my mom and I said, I'm coming back to you. And I was back in my body faster than you can snap your fingers. And I came back. And then I had to tell them I was alive. So I worked on that for a minute and they couldn't hear me. So I tried standing up on the bed and jumping up and down, and that wasn't working. And I tried screaming and that wasn't working. And the doctor said that when he saw my heartbeat come back, the thing that he noticed was that my lips were moving the words, I'm alive. And that's when I came back. So I knew when I came back that I had more to do. I didn't know what that was, but I knew that I wasn't meant to go yet.
So let me ask you a few questions about it. So you said it was a fabulous place. Describe it to me. Tell me what it looked like.
It's impossible to describe. There's not really the word that comes the closest to being able to explain what it feels like is glory. There is, if you've ever been so elated about something that it just overwhelms you, that's what this felt like. It felt like you were, first of all, it felt like you were suspended in something that was the most amazing something ever. So it was kind of like, it was hard to move because there was this thick feeling around you that was just love. And there was an understanding of things that it's very hard to explain to people. I had some questions about certain things in life that I was confused about. The minute I was there, I knew all the answers. And it was there was no question, which is a very powerful feeling. If you've ever been in that place of contentment where there's just not a problem, that's what it felt like. There was never going to be a problem again. And that was really quite freeing. It's also the feeling that I strive for in my life, because I know when I feel that feeling, I'm closest to heaven.
Now, you said you saw people, but you didn't know any of the people, right?
No, they were just, it was kind of like being in a park. And there were little groups of people and people were running up to other people. It was outside. It's hard to explain.
Well, it's interesting. I think everybody would love to know, okay, what's it going to be?
Well, it's very, I think, so part of that kind of knowing everything was that I got an answer to kind of that question of where am I? It was basically you're in a place that you made up because it's what makes you feel comfortable. And I couldn't, like, for example, I couldn't see the person that I was talking to. I only saw an outline of light. And I was told that I'm not capable of understanding the person. So I made what I was seeing up because it's what my brain can comprehend. So, okay, I'm fine with that.
Well, that is interesting. Well, I have a number of other questions because you've had such an interesting life. It kind of started, you said, when your mom and dad were divorced, and the difference in that he didn't pay child support, he gave you a different way of support. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so this was well before I died. This was when I was 2. My parents were divorced. And my father, first of all, he bought my mother season tickets to all the sporting events in my hometown, which was Houston, and said I would love for my daughter to know sports. So take her to every game she can go to. And I became a sports fanatic. I love all sports. I've loved all Houston teams. I thought it was really sweet when the Oilers followed me to Tennessee. So I've learned how to lose really well because most of my teams did lose most of the time. Um, but he gave me experiences. He believed that it was much more important for me to live life than to be in school for a period of time. So if there was ever a time, he was an international interior designer. He designed department stores all over the world. If there was ever a time that he was finishing up a department store, it'd be about a 6-week trip. And he would take me out of school, take me to wherever we were, usually is beginning of the summer, so I would only miss a few weeks of school. And I would go to live in Osaka or Kyoto or Singapore or Hong Kong or wherever he was building that store. I spent some time in California. And when I was there throughout the years, and this was from the time I was about 12 to the time that I was about 18 or 19, were those trips. And throughout that whole time, he had me be very independent. He would be working all day. So he would introduce me to the bellman or the concierge or whoever, and I would go and talk to them and find out where to go for the day. And I would go and do something by myself. When I lived in Singapore, which was the first place, I was very young, and they basically got me kind of orientated on transportation to go over to Sentosa Island every day. So I would take the funicular over to Sentosa Island and hang out on the beach for a day, and then go back to Singapore and have dinner with the executives at the hotel restaurants. And I learned about languages and culture and, cultural norms. I learned really early that not every culture responds the same way to the same things. Like in some cultures, you hand people things with both hands, and you make eye contact only if you're the superior in the relationship. And there was a whole lot of having to navigate that from a very young age. I also learned that you need to be very careful about things in Japanese restaurants that look like asparagus, because they very well may be a big piece of wasabi.
Which is very hot.
Mm-hmm. I found that out the hard way when I picked up the wasabi and ate it.
So is that the reason that you can learn any language in 6 weeks?
The reason I can learn any language in 6 weeks is that I have a photographic memory. So I can, particularly Korean was the most easy because it's a phonetic language. If you learn the alphabet, you basically know how to pronounce anything. So I learned Korean in probably 3 weeks. I learned Spanish in high school and elementary school in Texas. And then I learned Portuguese because I worked in retail, and I had a bunch of Brazilian clients who would come to visit me, and they were speaking primarily Portuguese. So I needed to know just enough to get my clients around the store. It was one of the busiest stores in Florida, and it had a tremendous amount of Brazilian shoppers. So I taught myself Portuguese. And once you've learned Spanish and Portuguese, French comes very easy. So when we went to France, I took about 6 weeks and I taught myself French. We lived in France for the World Cup for a month. And it was great. And I got us around, and people were very appreciative that I was trying to speak French, and they would speak to me in English because they didn't want me to butcher the language. They were just happy I tried. But I really wanted to speak in French. But yeah, I just picked them up very fast.
I would love to be able to do that.
It's great until you've got one or two of them coming at you at the same time, and you only know just enough to get by, and you get them all confused. But I'm not fluent in any of them. I can understand Spanish fluently, but I don't have a good enough vocabulary.
Tell me how you invented the cheeseburger.
Oh, this is fun. So my parents, they were hippies. And we had this huge kind of suburban type truck that they had taken all the back seats out of and put some carpet in. And I basically ran around in the back of the truck from the time I was 4 until the time I was 10. And somewhere between 4 and 10, probably closer to 4, maybe 5 or 6 years old, we used to go once a week to this place in Houston called Lucky Burger. It was a big barrel-shaped drive-in restaurant where they made hamburgers. And I had been going there for probably 5 or 6 times, and I never got anything but a hamburger. And I kind of didn't like hamburgers. They were a little boring to me, but I'd never tried anything else. I just thought the hamburger was boring. So this particular trip to Lucky Burger, I went up to the window of the car and ran up to the front of the car and said, "Can I order for myself this time?" And my mom and stepdad said, "Sure, you can order for yourself. What do you want?" And I said, "Well, I would like you, sir," speaking to the man in the window, "do you have any cheese in there?" And the guy was like, "I can check. I probably have some cheese." And I said, "Well, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take a piece of cheese, and I would like you to melt it on top of my burger. You know, if you'd like, you can do that for other people too, because I think it'll make it much better. And you should probably call it a cheeseburger." Well, at this point, I had never encountered a cheeseburger. I had no idea that such a thing existed. And this man and my mom and my stepdad were nice enough to let me continue to believe that. So he said, "Let me see what I can do." And he went back in the back for a minute and he came back out and he said, "I want you to try this. Tell me if this works." So I had a bite of my first cheeseburger and I said, "That is perfect. From now on, I would like a cheeseburger when we come." And he said, "That's a great idea. Do you think it'd be okay if I put that on the menu?" And I said, "Sure, you can do whatever you want." So for about 2 years, I was pretty convinced I invented the cheeseburger and nobody ever told me any differently. And really, it's not a story about inventing the cheeseburger. It's a story about being encouraged to have creativity and imagination, and just the fact that my parents never discouraged that.
Yeah, that's great. Tell me the story about the 4-leaf clover.
Oh, this is a good one. So my husband says that I'm a leprechaun. And the reason that he says that is because throughout my life, in various different times, 4-leaf clovers find me. For example, when I was very young, my dad came to visit me. And I was walking around the neighborhood with him. And I took him over to a place where a few weeks earlier, I had found some 4-leaf clovers. And I picked one of the 4-leaf clovers and I handed it to him. And he said, "You should never tell anyone where this place is. And you should never pick another of these clovers." And he explained to me that they were the mommies and daddies of the other clovers and that if I picked them all, no more would come. And so I said, "Okay, I'll never tell anyone where this is, but can I bring a 4-leaf clover in to show and tell?" And he said, "Sure, you can. Just be very careful you don't tell anyone where you found this." And so I did. I brought a 4-leaf clover in to show and tell, and my classmates told me I was lying, and that it wasn't really a 4-leaf clover, and that I just cut it to look like one. And I told them I couldn't tell them where they were, but that I wasn't lying. Well, my best friend followed me home from school that day, and she said, "I just can't believe you would make up a story like that." And I said, "I didn't make it up. You want to see where they are?" And I showed her, and about 2 weeks later, all the 4-leaf clovers were gone. So I learned my lesson, and I'm never going to trust people to find my 4-leaf clover patches again. But some years later, I had inherited this cottage garden, and I was going to find a book on how to take care of a cottage garden. And I went to Goodwill and I found this amazing old gardening book on cottage gardens. I bought it without really flipping through it and took it home, and I was sitting on the porch. By the way, it was sitting on a porch where I found the first 4-leaf clovers. And I was sitting on the porch of my new house and I was reading through the book, and I turned to a page and there was a 4-leaf clover on the page. I turned to another page and there were 4 more 4-leaf clovers on the page. Turned to another and another, and I dumped the book upside down and hundreds of 4-leaf clovers fell out of the book. Someone had pressed them all in there and they were just falling out of this book. So I kept all the 4-leaf clovers, and gave them away periodically to friends, whoever who needed a little luck. Some years after that, I was a realtor and I was showing some houses to a couple, and I decided I would go and I would sit on the front porch while they looked through the house. And as I was sitting on the front porch, I looked down and the entire front yard was infested with four-leaf clovers. So I brought them outside and I had them sit down next to me and tell me what they thought about the house. And then I had them look out across the lawn. And of course, they bought that house because it was a four-leaf clover field, basically. So they just follow me to front porches, apparently.
That is amazing.
And it happens, I am very good at finding four-leaf clovers.
And then probably why you have a lot of good luck.
I definitely have a lot of good luck. And I tell you, a lot of times you make your own luck. What I do not do is allow any opportunity to go unexperienced. I will, and my husband made the mistake one time in Korea of letting me make the choice of whether I was going to be invited by a person on the street to come to a family dinner at a local Korean house, because he thought I would turn it down. I'm like, honey, you clearly don't know me. Of course I want to go to dinner at a local Korean house. So we end up in this van being taken to this local Korean house, and we're sure we're going to either be kidnapped or sold into slavery or sold to or something. And it just turned out to be this amazing evening with all these World Cup soccer fans eating a dinner at this amazing private home in Korea. It was one of the best nights we ever had, but it came from not saying no to the random person on the street asking me to get in a van and go to a house for dinner.
That's wild. Now, you said that dogs trust you. So are you like a dog whisperer or something?
I don't think I'm a dog whisperer. They do trust me. I've been adopting greyhounds forever. I am kind of a horse whisperer, though. Horses I used to live in Chicago for a while, and the street horses that pull the carriages would often go off course to come up to me. It happened several times. I have an ex-boyfriend who had two horses that were just unmanageable. He didn't like other people to ride them because they were very rough. I was bareback on one of them within 15 minutes of meeting the horse.
So have you ridden horses a lot, or have you ever owned a horse?
I'm not a very good rider, but I really do love horses. And I'm not afraid to get on one's back.
No, I guess you're not. After 15 minutes, you were there.
One of the interesting circumstances of having died and come back is that I'm not at all afraid of death. So there's very few things that I will not try, because what's the worst thing that can happen? I mean,
You die again.
it's okay. It's kind of nice. So I have to know, I've had to teach myself over the years the things that I should say no to. And I've come up with a few of those things. They're the things that'll kill me. Like I'm not a skier. I'm a lodge girl. I should not be trusted to go to the top of the mountain and find the safe way down, because I find the way that involves flying off of a cliff.
Well, it sounds like you're not afraid of obstacles and challenges. So tell me, what's the biggest challenge you could think of that you face?
Employees. Having employees is definitely the biggest challenge I face. But no, I really don't. They call me unstoppable for a reason. And I had an employee ask me one time, she said, I want to be just like you when I grow up. I go, well, there's your first mistake. I've never grown up. I joke with people that I'm stuck at 10 years old because I have that kind of childish inquisition. But completely lost my train of thought. this girl asked me how to be like I am. And she said, you're so determined. And I said, it's not determined. Determined implies that someone else has a choice. What I am is unstoppable. And she asked me to kind of explain how to become unstoppable. And that was really the first time I'd thought about the things that I can overcome. And I said, well, your step one is know that you're in control. Because, when I was told to go back, how was I going to get there? He said, you're in control. You have been the whole time. And that was the first time I realized that the doctors weren't going to be able to fix me, that it was within me to fix myself. And I was better and out of intensive care 2 days after I got out of the hospital. And that was because of putting my mind to it, not waiting on them to fix me. I had been waiting for 5 days for them to fix me, and there wasn't a way they could fix me.
Let's talk about that a bit. And I'm thinking how you might be able to give some guidance to people. I'm concerned about the teenage suicide today. I'm concerned about people that feel that they can't face tomorrow, and yet they're so young, they've hardly had much experience today. And I think part of it comes from bullying, part of it comes from being insecure, maybe having to feel perfect, I don't know. But what advice or what guidance might you give to people today in those kinds of feelings in those situations?
The first thing is, so I was bullied a little bit as a child. I was a little bit different. Hippie parents who let me dress myself. I would wear tutus to school, and it was rough sometimes being me as a kid. But I didn't, and I've talked to a lot of teenagers about this, because I've had people approach me and say, I'd really like you to talk to my daughter because you've been in this situation. I did consider taking my own life when I was a teenager as well. It was after a car accident, and I was just embarrassed and upset, and I thought it was the end of the world, and of course it wasn't. But we're crazy when we're that young. Our brains aren't quite right, and we just don't understand that there is more out there. And really, what I've told people is be in control of what you can be in control of, and don't let the other stuff hold you back. If you go through life with your good intentions and doing what makes you feel that feeling that I was trying to get closer to, which is that love, what I learned early on is that feeling doesn't come from getting something for yourself. It doesn't come from being the popular girl. It doesn't come from getting the boyfriend that everyone else wants. It didn't come from joining the right clubs. It came from giving back. And I removed myself from those situations where I felt bullied into or pressured into doing something I didn't want to do. When my friends became more promiscuous than I felt comfortable being, I left those friendships. And I don't miss those friendships at all. I don't feel like I lost out on anything because I chose to be an acquaintance to a lot of people, but only close to very few. And when the people that I was close to were damaging to me, I got away from them right away. And that's where my notes came in. And that's kind of what I teach the kids or the teens, is live your life with these 4 principles. You're in control. Do things for the right reasons. Set and write down your goals. Know where you want to go, or you're not going to go there. Figure out what's important to you and where you want to be, and then break down those goals into little baby steps to get there. And then if you get off track, a series of short corrections will get you back on track. And the 5th one is practice reckless optimism. If you can do those 5 things, then all you need to know are what the obstacles that are going to come in front of you. And those obstacles are going to be the things that could kill you. So sometimes that's drugs, sometimes that's skiing. The things that steal from you, and that can be your time or your money or your things. the lessons that you've already learned. And I look at that as, you know, mistakes are tuition. Don't make me pay for the same class twice.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I love that saying. Someone told me that. I don't even know who originally said it. But it's true. I mean, I'll learn from the mistake the first time. The second time, we're done. You try that again with me, and I don't have time or energy for that. Bye-bye. And I call it noping them. You got noped. And then the things that distract you from those goals. If you feel like you've started to get off the wrong track, quit the job. Go live in the other place. Whatever those goals were, those baby steps, if you feel like you're getting off track on them, turn right back around and get right back on track with them. And then the final principle is be nice or leave, which is, there's a famous folk artist who does these amazing self-taught paintings with bottle caps and the words, be nice or leave. He sells them quite a bit in New Orleans, and I always fell in love with that because it's a great way to remind yourself that nope doesn't have to be harsh. Nope can be disappearing. Nope, if you're in an abusive relationship, for example, nope can be slowly weaning yourself off of a toxic friendship. Nope can be finding a way to have 3 nice things to say about that backstabbing relative that you hate to see at the family events, and only talking to them about those 3 things so that you can have a pleasant conversation without asking them to remove the knife from your back. So that's what I usually tell people.
Tell me more what you mean by reckless optimism. How would you describe that?
Optimism is, it's erring towards the good in people. So remember when you were 10 and you saw a puddle and you jumped in the puddle because it was fun, but you didn't necessarily think about the consequences of the mud that was going to get on your clothing. Or when I was a kid, I spent a lot of time outside playing in the dirt. I would find the tadpole colonies and watch them grow up, and I'd go check on them every day and see how far along the tadpoles had gotten. And but they were frogs. I was so excited to have seen them graduate to that. And, you know, it's important to look around for those things. And I think as we get older, we get distracted by the day-to-day and we don't look around for the things that are fun. I find that solace in Hallmark Christmas movies sometimes. I was talking about that with a friend today. Sometimes I find those things in the garden. We inherited this amazing, not inherited, but we were lucked into this amazing house that used to be a trolley station. It was an old Victorian house that was converted into a trolley station and then back into a house. And because it had train tracks running by it, the yard was a mess when I got it. Now I had already taught myself to cottage garden, so I decided I was going to transform this place. And I did transform it. But in the process of digging in the yard, I had to dig down quite deep to get through the rubble that was buried under the train tracks and get to actual good dirt. And I found these amazing stones that I used to edge the beds of the garden. And half of those stones have bones and fossils and just amazing fossils in them. And I had a group of kids from a housing project in our neighborhood come over to learn about gardening and social enterprise, and we had them divide some plants and take those plants to sell them and nurture them till spring and then sell them and make some money on them. And one of the games we played with them was we had them run around the garden and identify the bones and count as many bones as they could in all the different rocks. And we told whoever found the most bones that we would name a dinosaur after them. So we named all the dinosaurs in the rocks. Now, they're not really dinosaurs. Who knows what they are? But we had a lot of fun doing that. And the adults that were doing that had more fun than the kids did. That's practicing reckless optimism. It's looking around for the dinosaur bones in your rocks, in your garden beds.
That's a wonderful just concept, because I do think we forget to be happy sometimes. We forget to laugh.
Oh,
And
yeah.
those are the things that make us happy and laugh.
Like last night, we went to this thing called Glow, which is a light show in a transformed stadium. And I ran up to Santa and hugged him because that's what you do. You run up to Santa and hug him. I don't have any children, but that's okay. I'm still young enough at heart that I can embrace Santa. And we colored in the coloring books in the Santa's play shop, and we drank the hot chocolate, made our own, put our own marshmallows and chocolate and whipped cream on them and built our own hot chocolates. And we, ran up the ice fort and looked out over the ice skating rink and ran through the purple light forest. And I was with only adults.
I have to ask you at least one more question, because I have always traveled a lot. And of course, you think, how many of those airplane rides can you go on without maybe the odds catching up with you? And you said that you could tell me about airplane crash landings. Tell me about that.
So I've been in 3 airplane crash landings. All were commercial airlines. The first was when I was very young. I was going to visit my father in California from Texas. And after we took off, I was traveling alone, unaccompanied minor. So I was right in the front seats. And the flight attendant came out and let me know that there was going to be an announcement, not to be scared about it, that we were going to land in Las Vegas because there was some trouble with the landing gear and they didn't want us landing in LA because they needed to be able to put some foam on the runway and have emergency vehicles line the runway, and they wouldn't have enough of a window when we were landing. So they got us all ready for a crash landing, and they flew around the plane until it ran out of gas and then or fuel. And then they had us land on this foamed runway, and all the emergency vehicles were lining the runway, and they slid us down the slides, and we landed fine. It was rough, but there was no damage to the plane other than the landing gear that was already damaged. And then they handed us all a roll of quarters and sent us into the airport to play slot machines until they could get us another flight to Los Angeles. So I thought it was like a ride. I mean, this was so much fun. We had this landing where we were zooming sideways and, then we got to slide down a slide into foam, and then they handed me quarters and sent me with a flight attendant who was old enough that I could play slot machines with her. I mean, it was like an amusement park to me. So that was great. Right? So my first experience was lovely. So the second time that something happened, I was in a very small propeller plane that, those ones that seat like 12 people. You've got 2 seats on one side, 1 on the other side. And we were in the middle of a very bad storm going from Chicago to somewhere. And they diverted us to Cincinnati and said that we were going to have to land there. Well, as they said, it was going to be very rough, that we needed to brace the entire time we were flying into Cincinnati. So we did. And there was a gentleman next to me who was clearly panicked. He was not doing well. So I said, "Do you mind if I hold your hand?" He was like, "No, that would be fine." And I asked the lady across the row from us to hold my other hand as well. She was also stressed. I said, "I've been in a plane crash before, and it all worked out fine. These guys know what they're doing. It's going to be awesome. Why don't you tell me some stories about your family, and we'll just talk our way down?" And so I got them talking, and I told them some stories as well, not of course about plane crashing, but just kept them distracted. And we landed pretty well without incident. There were a couple times where we dropped by a couple thousand feet and it felt like it. We had lightning had taken out one of the engines of the plane, and that's why we had to land, because we were flying with one propeller. And so we did, and we landed fine. And the guy afterwards handed me his business card, and he said, I need you to take this card, hang on to it, call me if you ever need anything. You don't know who I am. You also don't know what you have done. I'm pretty sure I would have died of a heart attack had I not been so entertained on our way down. And I kept his card, and this was before the internet. And some years later, I found the card and I Googled him, and he was the founder of Sun Microsystems. And
did you ever get in contact with him?
No, because I never needed anything. But when I do, I will certainly call him. So that was the second time. The third time we were on TV was actually, we were coming into Chicago Midway, and we veered off the runway and got stuck in the mud. And we were stuck in the mud for like 7 hours because they couldn't figure out how to get us out of the mud. So they had the camera crews and everything filming the plane stuck in the mud. And I was on that one too.
Well, there's certainly some experience there. I think the moral of that story is maybe don't fly with you.
Actually, it ended up okay every single time they did.
Well, that's
so
true.
Maybe you want me on the plane with you if it's going to go down.
Well,
don't forget all those 4-leaf clovers.
Talking with you. Do you have anything else that you would like to talk about or leave our audience with?
I feel like we've covered quite a bit.
Yeah.
It's maybe a bit overwhelming for folks. I think the most important thing is don't miss an opportunity. So much holds so many people back, but what are you being held back from? I kind of feel like it's the journey, not the destination, and we really need to make the journey worth it. If you're holding back so much that the journey is just safe and boring, then you're not doing it right.
I love that. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.